Hello, my name is Noelle Barr, and I am the 2023-24 Semmes Foundation Intern in Museum Studies and curator of A Particular Beauty, 19th-Century French Art at the McNay. A Particular Beauty is a temporary exhibition that takes another look at works in the museum's collection by 19th-century French masters, including Jean-Auguste Dominique, Édouard Manet, Berthe Morisot, Edgar Degas, Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec, among others. Please join me in a virtual walkthrough of the exhibition as we traverse critical themes and reframe our understanding of these works of art. This exhibition is informed by broad shifts in curatorial practice and current scholarship. European art history is experiencing a generative moment where art historians are navigating new territory regarding how we write and think about Eurocentric histories. The title, A Particular Beauty, derives from a fundamental primary source in 19th-century French art historical literature. Charles Baudelaire's essay, The Painter of Modern Life, was first published in 1863 in a French newspaper called Le Figaro. An art critic and essayist, Baudelaire encouraged his readers to embrace the aesthetics of a, quote, particular beauty, the beauty of circumstance and the sketch of manners, end quote. But in today's parlance, one may also consider a particular beauty as one that is distinct, individual, or subjective. And that is precisely the issue we are challenging as European art historians by way of holding our scholarship and research questions accountable for diverse audiences and dialogues. Composed of a total of 12 works on paper and paintings, A Particular Beauty is organized into 4 sections: exoticism, gendered spaces, labor and leisure, and bodies of nature. But the keen observer will quickly realize that the works on display could easily slip between each category and thus forge an even richer dialogue. The exhibition opens with a lithograph of Jean-Auguste Dominique's Grand Odalisque, originally painted in a high-polished academic style in 1814. As a neoclassicist, not only does the lithograph illustrate the artistic style that the Impressionists rejected, but it also provides an entry point into an ongoing eroticization of the feminine exotic identity. In the context of the 19th century, the exotic other is predominantly incarnated within the domain of Orientalism. Coined by the literary critic Edward Said, his book Orientalism, published in 1978, constructs a lens through which art historians have interrogated European depictions of the Near and Middle East in a post-colonial paradigm. One of the most prominent motivations of Orientalism was anchored in the white male artist's fetishization of nude women from the Ottoman harem. In reproducing Ingres' Le Grand Odalisque, the McNay's lithograph captures the intricate designs of a sofa, incense burner, and the odalisque's head wrap rendered in the neoclassical painter's final composition. European imaginations largely invented the notion that the odalisque was a Turkish sultan's favorite concubine. This interpretation fertilized European creativity and satiated exotic fantasies, which led to variegated representations and interpretations of the eroticized female other well into the 20th century, as demonstrated by Pierre-Auguste Renoir's painting of his nursemaid and model, Gabrielle Renard, in an oriental costume. Gabrielle's open composure reveals her bare chest, with a white band of fabric truncating her torso at the waist. Small in scale, the painting is likely a quick study. The diaphanous white-striped tunic, donned by Gabrielle in the McNay's painting, appears in Renoir's Odalisque from 1870, demonstrating a practice employed by many artists who staged exotic scenes with props and costumes in their studios. The idea and depiction of the exotic other was multi-layered. Artists mobilized a variety of compositional techniques and studio practices, and while some did venture to the Middle East, others never left France. Like Renoir, Édouard Manet employed European artists in his studio, dressed in Spanish costumes, culminating in a suite of paintings in the 1860s. While exceedingly more complex than the scope of this exhibition, the following work by Manet illustrates the artist's own negotiation of the French exoticization of Spain that was foregrounded in cultural and racial otherness. The Napoleonic invasion of the Spanish peninsula in 1808, 1814, and 1823 opened the gateway for officers and diplomats to loot Spanish works of art and objects. In the 19th century, Spaniards were not considered pure-blood Europeans, but rather cast as an intermediary ethnic and racial minority located between Europe and Africa. One of Manet's models, who was actually Spanish, was the danseuse étoile, or star dancer, of a dance troupe from Madrid. Lola Melia, stage name Lola de Valence, performed alongside Don Mariano Camprubi at the Hippodrome in Paris from August to November in 1862. The lithograph from the McNay's collection is copied after a large painted version, and it portrays Melia in fourth position with her right foot pointed toward the viewer. Melia's dark features are cocooned within a white veil cascading down her ruffled top and wide bell-shaped skirt as she holds a closed fan in her right proper hand. A poem by Baudelaire about the Spanish dancer is etched below the image. Tinged with erotic and exotic flair, this work is an example of how artists sought to ascertain the visualization of people placed on the margins of European identity, particularly located between Europe and Africa, and whiteness and blackness. Although not every form of exoticism is identical, a commonality is the tendency to conquer the other nation and its political body through the objectification, eroticization, and exoticization of the female form. Why have there been no great women artists? This rhetorical yet serious question was posed by Linda Nochlin in 1971 for an essay in Art News. Nochlin entered a critical discourse on the valuable, albeit complicated, attempts by other scholars who sought to prove there were indeed great women artists. For instance, monographic studies sought to rediscover a woman artist whose achievements were ostensibly lost to history, or other historians and critics proposed the existence of a distinctly feminine style that diverged from the subject matter and genres of the masculine domain. Indeed, these operations ultimately reinforced the existence of a white male European standard, and did not properly acknowledge that there were social and institutional conditions preventing female artists from ascending the ranks to the status of a master or genius. Art history has traditionally positioned the 19th century white upper-class French female artist within the domestic space of motherhood and private interiors, spheres of femininity that are best captured in the works of Berthe Morisot and Marie Cassatt. Integrated among the fraternity of Impressionists, Berthe Morisot was raised in a well-off bourgeois home and married Manet's brother, Jean Manet. Bourgeois women were never expected to surpass the status of an amateur of the arts, often practicing needlework and decorative crafts in their domestic spheres. As one of the only female artists to exhibit with the French Impressionists, Morisot participated in 7 of the 8 exhibitions, having missed one due to an illness after the birth of her only daughter, Julie Manet. Morisot was invited to participate in the first exhibition by none other than Edgar Degas. In an undated, partially lost letter, Degas wrote to Madame Morisot, Berthe's mother, that, quote, "We think that Miss Berthe Morisot's name and talent are too important to us to do without," end quote. Morisot was a particularly skilled artist in her own right, who persistently negotiated her double career as a professional painter and mother to her only daughter, Julie. The drawing lesson illustrates her blurring of gender roles. The artist's face is a mirror, as she draws her in her daughter's reflection. A young Julie peers over her mother's shoulder, studying the sketch. Morisot's focused gaze meets our eyes as we observe a private educational moment between a mother and daughter. The McNay's print, however, was cancelled, as indicated by the 2 circles centered at the top and bottom of the paper. Nonetheless, this etching is particularly special in that Morisot places herself in the literal frame of a maternal role. While her paintings such as The Wet Nurse or the Mozart Sonata do greater justice at representing Morisot's profound artistic identity as a bourgeois painter of domestic scenes, they also expose her tendency to paint herself outside of the composition as a working artist behind the canvas. The affluent position of the white upper-class women held by Cassatt and Morisot starkly contrasted with the prostitutes and public performers depicted by Edgar Degas and Henri de Toulouse-Lautrec. These women were classified among a social realm of the demi-monde, or the half-world class of individuals living on the fringes of society. Typically, this sector of Paris frequented popular entertainment venues, including the circus, brothel, and café-concert. Degas had been cast as a misogynist, an accusation dating to the artist's lifetime. Questions regarding Degas' position on women have galvanized controversial opinions. In the 1880s, the artist explored a series of nude figures that have been studied by the art historian Carol Armstrong. For Armstrong, Degas' coarse application of pastels in his late bather scenes weaves an optical veil and ultimately interrupts one's voyeuristic access to the nude figure. Culminating with the self-reflexive gesture or inward positioning of the nude woman, the ostensibly male viewer is pushed outside of the private quarters and prevented from experiencing the pleasures of the female figure. In a similar vein, the McNay's lithograph, After the Bath, leaves a grainy residue from the process of transferring greasy ink or crayon from a stone or metal plate onto a dampened paper. Degas' composition portrays a nude woman at the left of the image, bending sideways as she dries herself with a towel, while her maid assists standing at the back of the right corner. The artist's use of shadow sculpts the indents of the nude body, articulating the curve of her spine, the flesh between her thighs and buttocks, and rolls of skin as her damp hair mops over her head. With her expansive back towards us, we are pushed to the outskirts of the scene. Informed by Degas' images of working-class women, Toulouse-Lautrec cultivated intimate friendships among the proletariat. The artist found an especially lucrative opportunity in making images of the celebrated quadrille dancer, Jane Avril, who commissioned posters from Toulouse-Lautrec. In his 1893 print, Le Café Concert, Toulouse-Lautrec stylizes Avril's feminine features and corporeal movement. Known for her high kicks as a can-can dancer, the artist distills his image of the performer into a collection of thin, straight, thick, and serpentine black lines. While teasing the sexual politics between lower-class female performers and the upper-class men making their advances, the artist simultaneously portrayed the women with averted gazes, thus fabricating an air of indifference and autonomy. Working women were a part of a highly stratified social matrix in which the status of the male flaneur dominated. On the streets of Paris, at the opera, and in the brothels, weaving among crowds was the Parisian dandy or flaneur. Deriving from the French verb flâner, meaning to stroll or saunter, the flaneur was an idyllic type. He was exclusively masculine, bourgeois, and white, and someone to whom the socio-economic privileges of modern Paris were afforded. The next section, Labor and Leisure, looks at the position of white male European artists and the different economic strata they depicted. From Edgar Degas' drawings of the ballet to Jean-François Millet and Camille Pissarro's Clarion representations of peasants in the countryside, it is critical to reflect upon the histories of the working class, which artists transformed into lucrative works of art. Although linked with the elite sphere of the opera, young dancers were associated with the demi-monde. They were frequently pursued by the opera house abonné, or annual subscriber, who consisted of men including financiers and political figures. Newspapers and gossip columns satiated the public's desire for scandals, while the journalist and art critic Théophile Gautier blamed the mothers of Le Petit Rat, the name given to the young dancers, for prostituting and grooming their daughters. Degas' seated dancer obfuscates the pernicious activities in which young dancers engaged by choosing to tightly crop the isolated subject, thereby excluding any visual cue of a male solicitor or grooming mother. Arms stretched toward her knee, the dancer's layered tutu fans out behind her, creating a voluminous shape. The stiff structure of the skirt is articulated with white chalk and shadows of charcoal on a tan paper. Degas' interest in the physical gestures, poses, and exertions of dancers expose the artificial spectacle of the stage, while his drawings and paintings, such as the McNays, recenter his deep-seated commitment to the practice of drawing and aspirations of rendering the human figure in its naturalistic form. Artists like Jean-François Millet and Camille Pissarro captured alternative images of labor beyond the urban circle. Millet was born into a peasant family in Normandy, in northern France, where he worked to cultivate his family's farmland. Thus, Millet had intimate exposure to the tasks of sowing seed, tilling soil, and reaping harvests that are frequently depicted in his œuvres. Artists often transformed images of labor into idealized types, as in Pissarro's Haymakers Resting. Comparatively, Millet captured the rugged conditions and physical motions exerted by farmers, as seen in his painting of A Man with a Hoe. Millet balanced art and reality, for he was attuned to conflicts among landowners, the bourgeoisie, and forest guards during the 1848 revolts. Social and political unrest over land in the French countryside disintegrated the romanticized veneer of agrarian life, in which both Parisian citizens and art historians have typically cast images of peasant laborers as beings who were close to nature and uncorrupted by urban life. Millet's The Walk to Work depicts a man and woman beside each other in a vast field. Indicated by cross-hatching, the couple wears the same coarse hemp fabric and frayed clogs. Their balanced stride relays a stoic presence, as livestock graze in the background and an idle plow rests in the soil. While the man wears a hat protecting his eyes from the sun, his thick calloused hands grasp the end of a pitchfork. The woman parrots her partner's accessory by donning a woven basket over her head as a carafe hangs from her other hand. Between 1855 and 1856, Millet produced some of his first etchings for a commercial market, during which the artist's friend and biographer, Alfred Sancier, persuaded him to reproduce Going to Work, a painted version of the McNay's lithograph. While continuing to think about access to and ownership of land in the countryside, the final section of the exhibition displays 3 paintings by Camille Corot, Gustave Courbet, and Édouard Manet regarding themes of nature. Here we explore art through an ecocritical lens, defined by a view beyond that which is anthropocentric, where one looks beyond human subjects to our relationship within the biosphere. In the 19th century, Europe witnessed the publication of Charles Darwin's On the Origin of Species in 1859, the coining of the term ecology, and the discovery that noxious particulates were 3 times higher in Paris than in rural locations, causing pulmonary and visibility issues. While industrialization and the pollution of the city persuaded Parisians to venture out into the countryside for fresh air, Gustave Courbet was strategic in positioning himself as a mountain man among the bourgeois artist groups. Courbet was raised in Ornon, located on the Swiss border, but his family would not have been considered peasants. Rather, they owned land and were of the rural bourgeoisie. With that said, his formative years were spent among the mountains and Jura River, where he was indeed inspired artistically. The McNay's painting of the Black Well was likely created during one of the artist expeditions in Ornon. Letters from this period between 1864 and 1866 express how lucrative painting the Black Well was, and that he produced about 40 landscapes in his Ornon atelier. Coupled with the artist's innovative practice in using a palette knife to apply paint to canvas, his works allegedly brought the abundant landscapes of the French countryside to Parisian apartments. In 1853, Napoleon III hired Baron Haussmann to reconstruct the city of Paris and bring light and air into the urban landscape. Known as the Haussmannization of Paris, this project undertook the renovation of the city's medieval streets, with the widening of boulevards, integration of gas lighting, and the construction of public parks and fountains. Public parks and private gardens provided immediate access to nature, and they appear frequently in Impressionist painting. What was once a history of aristocratic pleasure gardens in the 18th century became public spaces ornamented with cafes, kiosks, and benches. Bourgeois denizens sought to harness these ecological microcosms on their private property, and the act of gardening became a respectable activity for upper-class women. Although a fashionable hobby, Parisians embraced gardening as an intellectual science and cure for personal maladies. Perhaps the best recognized artist to take up horticulture and gardening would be Claude Monet and his garden at Giverny, where he painted his infamous water lilies. Our final painting, Manet's Morning Glories and Nasturtiums from 1881, illustrates a compelling narrative on the demand for nature, either in soil or on canvas. On a pre-primed ground, Manet constructs a grid across an elongated canvas with brown paint of varying hues. Manet's characteristic sweeping brushstrokes create crosshatches between each square, articulating the shadow of the foliage climbing up a garden trellis. Quick splotches of crimson paint form the petals of nasturtiums, while only the ghost of a violet morning glory appears at the top left corner of the painting. Manet's pivot towards decorative painting aligns with submissions to the Salon des Arts Décoratifs, as well as a municipal incentive that commissioned artists to adorn the interiors of Parisian edifices. Aims to beautify Paris as reflected in Haussmann's citywide project were also in demand following the destruction from the Franco-Prussian War defeat between 1870 and 1871, and chaos during the French Commune. The unfinished work is one of 6 trumeaux, or decorative panels, that Manet worked on outside of his Parisian studio. The McNay-specific painting was intended to join 3 additional panels depicting an eagle owl, rabbit, and the corner of a garden. Thank you for joining me on this virtual walkthrough for A Particular Beauty, 19th Century French Art at the McNay. Additional exhibition content, including an essay and audio descriptions, are available on the museum website and Bloomberg Connects. We hope to see you in the gallery soon.